and welcome to Ask the Experts, our monthly deep dive into a specific topic from the world of investing. Along with industry experts, we take a thorough look at the topic, how it relates to what is going on in the world right now, and also answer any questions that you may have. Our theme for today is green energy and green investing. And to discuss that, we're joined by an all-star panel that includes Shane Grovue, a principal at Pacific Impact Partners, and also our guest moderator for today. Welcome, Shane. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
Fantastic. We also have Bryce Anderson, VP of Investments from RE Royalties. Hi, Bryce. How's things?
Great, John. Thanks. Happy to be here.
Good stuff. And all the way from Sweden, we have Claes Fredriksson, founder and CEO of Liquid Wind. Hi, Claes. How's things?
Hi. All is good. It's been a long hike, but it's all good.
Good. This is certainly a fascinating topic, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what our panel have to say. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Shane, who's going to give us a little bit of an overview on the topic and then dive straight into the discussion with our panelists. So Shane, all yours.
Okay, great. Thank you, John. And welcome everybody to this session on green energy and green investing. So what is green investing? I guess we start there. Really, it's the idea that investors can invest in companies and projects with an environmental benefit, like renewable energy, clean fuels, transportation, energy efficient buildings. It traces its origins to really two themes. So one side of green investing is really about giving an opportunity for investors to support causes, to support projects that align with their values, to make their money work in the way that they want it to. And then the other side of things is really around risk management. And this is maybe a bit less known, but this is where we see a lot of the large wealth funds, pension funds, moving over the last couple of decades to position more money into green investments. And this is really trying to reduce risk associated with fossil heavy portfolios, looking at the risk of climate change to business. And so I think it's a very fascinating topic. It's very important. I think it's important because investment can drive change. It can really be an incredibly powerful tool for climate action and other environmental causes. And also, I think from the investor perspective, it's very important, that investors are aware of the mounting risks to their portfolio of climate change. And so green investing offers an opportunity to address that. So without further ado, I think we'll get into the meat of it. I think everybody's really, there's certainly a lot of news happening on all sorts of fronts, but maybe we talk a bit about where you guys see climate change, climate action, the green energy sector. What's the state of things right now? And maybe I'll kick that to Bryce to start.
Yeah, I think it's been very much in the spotlight. You look at all the wildfires in the last year, start with Australia early in the year. We had them on the West Coast here in North America. I think it's been in everyone's mind. It continues to grow every year. It's over 280 billion US invested in the space in the last year. So I think it's definitely here, but to date, it's been very dominated by a lot of larger players, a lot of pension funds and the likes, where there hasn't been as many opportunities for kind of the smaller guys to invest, or the retail investors. And I definitely see that changing going forward, but it's already started, but definitely changing going forward.
Claes, how about from your perspective?
I think what I see in overall sort of climate change activity is the phenomenal shift from traditional conventional energy sources, if we take coal and gas and oil, into the solar and wind, and following on that also into the hydrogen space and energy storage, and then following on that into greener fuels, and then what we are related to, which is an electrofuel. So when you make fuel from electricity. And all of those things are drastically reduced in cost over the last 15 years. And that allows other type of investors to come in, either really small ones, if you will, who want to be part of it in a little way, or pension funds, which we see pretty much every day, a new announcement that a pension fund is going from conventional to more green, or even a lot green in their portfolios. So there's a big shift. And I was on a call today with a big energy utility in Germany, and they just say, well, we're definitely not going anywhere near coal any longer. So we got to go the other way. And it's just sort of inevitable that it's happening.
Yeah. And do you guys see that this has been changing? I mean, obviously, the big overlying driver being this cost reduction over the last decade. Massive decreases in electricity production from renewables. Do you see any acceleration, let's say, over the last year or so, since COVID, let's say, in the space? And how do you think people's perspectives have changed, looking, better or worse?
Well, I think COVID's kind of been a blessing in disguise in a way that everyone's working from home now. And so they're not commuting. So you're not having those emissions from everyone taking the bus or the train or their car to work. And I think that's going to be whatever the new normal is, but definitely I think some of that's going to stay where there's more remote work, people working from home and reducing the emissions there. But I don't know, other than that it's, again, maybe people have a bit more time to follow it because they don't have to do that commute anymore. But I don't think it's changed the spotlight any more than just the fact, like I mentioned, all the wildfires and climate strike we had this year with kind of some, pretty big figures out there joining these climate strikes around the world.
I think what we see in Europe is of course very similar, but we also see, in addition to the fact that it's growing, if you will, by itself now, if we talk to solar and wind, because it becomes so inexpensive, but also we see on the European push towards the building it back better and the push to really drive completely renewable Europe by 2050, or a carbon neutral Europe by 2050. It's both about creating green, but now it's also about creating jobs. So it's building it back both job-wise and energy-wise in the right way. And I think in Europe, we felt a little bit that we've kind of have a good chance to really come out sort of ahead partly with the help of COVID and really push some of these things through. And we've seen what you may have heard of is the Innovation Fund, which is a large call for supporting new technologies and innovative technologies. And they've now gone from supporting strictly capital expenses to also supporting operating expenses over a 10-year period for transition fuels or transition solutions. And there's just closed a big call for 1 billion euro. And it gave a huge push in the industry of everybody wanting to be part of this call and this opportunity to be in that new drive for a greener Europe. So I think we see many positive things in some strange way coming out of that COVID tail.
Great. Bryce, RE Royalties operates globally, but we've heard from the European perspective. What are your thoughts on North America from a stimulus and a growth perspective in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree that the numbers are so competitive now. You look at solar, it costs 10% of what it did 10 years ago. You have some political changes in the States, which are probably going to drive even more money into the sector with trying to build back green as well, try to get to that 2050 target. But I think regardless, you saw it with the last administration, they weren't as, how would I say, comfortable with renewables. They didn't push them as much, but it didn't seem to really slow anything down because it's just unsubsidized. It makes so much sense. And I think that's what people are starting to realize. And hopefully more education gets out there where, renewables aren't something that needs to be subsidized anymore and have all this government support. It just makes economic sense. Sometimes even in the case where it doesn't even make sense to operate a fossil fuel asset anymore, it's actually cheaper to just stop operating it and build a brand new solar park and let that operate, which is like, how do you compete with that?
Amazing, amazing change in only a handful of years. So speaking of change, I'd like to get your thoughts on, you know, where we go from here and what that positive, hopefully, future looks like. And you know, investment is definitely very critical, but we also need to continue to drive innovation to achieve that greener future. And so, Claes, what do you think that future of technology, you know, what does that look like, and how can technology help get us there?
I think there's two parts of that really, and one is, if you will, hardware related. What can we do on the hardware side to make things continuously cheaper, whether it's taller wind turbines or better solar panels, or in the space where we are, cheaper electrolyzers or smarter fuel cells. That's all hardware related, and it's mainly driven by economies of scale and having more to sell to more companies quicker. That drives the price point down. So that's the one aspect that is hugely important. And as we build up volume in these things, that will help us on that reduction curve. But I think there's a whole other piece, which is the whole software aspect of it and the data collection of it. I mean, as we are building now facilities, we're using something we call a digital twin. So we design it once, and then we can multiply that facility multiple times and always have the latest version updated. So there's that design data, but there's also tracking data. We need to keep track of where the sun came from, or where the wind came from, or where the carbon dioxide in our case came from, and how it went all the way out to the fuel user somewhere at the far end of the value chain. And if we can keep track of these, then we can show the governing bodies that we're actually green all the way through, and then we have a higher value of our product. So there's a lot of data or IT data related aspects as well. And those we already know how to make really cheaply, but now we got to get them integrated very smart between the whole value chain as well. And that's where we see lots of integration happening, or lots of sort of innovation in the integration happening. And we're eager to push that as well. And therefore there will be lots of us to do. And then of course we have to build all these new systems. Like you're saying, you're closing down the oil factory or the oil power plants or the gas power plants. Now we're going to build something else. I mean, all the stuff that came out of the ground for free, more or less for free, we have to make it now from electricity and something else. So there's a lot of construction that will go into building our future systems. So there's huge opportunity for pretty much all of us.
Yeah, it's a great time for the sector, I think.
Yeah.
And do you see in terms of that innovation performance, you talk about data, big data, how have you seen the evolution for your business, for example, in terms of where you're going with that data side of things? You know, the green energy sector enabling the change and cost reduction in the hardware side, enabling us to look at those types of data and build these facilities? Or, you know, I guess what I'm wondering is how much you see the change and acceleration in big data AI over the last, say, 5 years in terms of enabling factors for allowing you to do what you need to do.
I think for us, the solutions are out there, and the suppliers know that they have them. I think in a classic infrastructure industry that we may not traditionally have been so used to using them. So normally you build the one plant or facility, and then you spend 3 years waiting or 5 years waiting, and you build a second plant. Now we know we're going to build a number of tens or hundreds of plants. So we're designing already with that in mind. So it's a matter of knowing that we want to get to something quite different in scale or portfolio, and therefore going after those types of solutions and trying to figure out where are they, who does the best simulation software, who does the best design software. We do all this stuff now in 3D walkthrough, so we can design our plant before we can walk through our plant before we even build it, and that also cuts down cost. But I think it's daring to look around what else is out there that has been used in other sectors or industries that we need to bring to our fairly traditional industry. And I think it's mixing people, it's mixing skills, and getting them together in new places. So it's not, we're not going to build a huge sort of big boring power plant. We're going to do something much cooler. And what we find exciting is that we get young, keen, clever people come to us and say, we like what you're doing. We like that you're going to be carbon neutral. Can I come and work for you? So it's a different kind of mindset, but it's really great. I mean, even social media and what we're doing right now, to be out there and talking about what we're doing. It's like we have guys that are 60 plus in our team, and they say, we never communicated before about our plants. That we did maybe after we had built them. And so now we're kind of taking the other way around. Tell people what you're planning to do. Come on here and help us, and let's do it together, cheaper, faster, better.
Yeah, I think you're starting to, you get the advantage of that alignment of purpose and cause with the employees, the contractors, suppliers that are excited to be part of this transition, and I think that level of engagement just accelerates the possibility for change.
Totally, it's really very cool. The engagement and the interest is so strong that we want to do something better, and that really works for us. It's been phenomenal.
That's great. So innovation, we often think immediately of technology, but there's a lot of other forms of innovation, and I think one important one is business model innovation, looking at innovations in how businesses are run, and also in the case of RE royalties, looking at innovation in financing strategies and investment. So more or less the same question that I posed to Claes, but for Bryce, how do you see financial innovation and its role in creating this new future? What does the future of investing for green energy look like?
Yeah, I think great question. I think to date it's been really dominated, like I said, by these big players. I think you have, as Claes kind of said, it's a very traditional industry to date. So especially on the finance side, I don't think it takes like a little bit of change can go a long way. Basically what we've done is taken a model that's been done in other industries for financing and just brought it to renewable energy. But beyond that, I see it changing where, with these larger groups, pension funds, not that they're not going to play in the space, but it's also a lot of large projects because they're writing $100 million checks to build these huge power generation assets that are typically quite remote. Really, the future is smaller projects locally, like distributed generation, where you have more projects are closer. It's more efficient in a way because you don't have to move the power from one end of a country or province to another. But then also having platforms where there's more green products where you can invest directly. I think there's this huge push we were just talking about. Everyone's kind of got it on their mind. It's getting a lot of attention, but we got to create more products to allow people to invest directly in it. And again, it's been quite overshadowed where if you're the retail investor, it can be really hard if you only want to invest, say, a couple $1,000 to really gain access to these projects. So I think as they get smaller, that'll become easier. And as we get more products, that'll become easier. And as we have more platforms, something like a front funder that makes the kind of whole investing process easier, where you can just go on there and they help you. And again, allow you to invest in something that's private that typically can be quite hard due to regulatory issues. That's really where I see it going.
Excellent.
Can I come in on that one? Because I think
yes, absolutely.
Totally
Please.
share what Bryce said there. And I mean, we used crowdfunding very early on. And when we started doing that, we got a lot of like, no, you can't do that. That's not the way we do business here. I mean, it's not the real way of doing things. And then we pushed through. We were actually encouraged by Ericsson. I mean, the phone guys, Ericsson, they have a Ericsson Venture or something. They said, no, go for it. You just see what happens. Go for crowdfunding. It's worth your while. And so we did that in Sweden or in Europe. And we're very, very pleased with it. We got, lots of investors. We've got a fair amount of money, but we also got lots of other interests. So we now have people, emailing us about this opportunity and that opportunity. And yesterday I'm on, I'm an investor in your company. I have this idea for you. What do you think? And so it's been just that access point, as I think you're saying, Bryce, has been very, very different in at least in the kind of business I've been doing before. And it's been very attractive. And we can now essentially go from crowdfunding of the development company to project funding of a facility. So we can kind of skip almost a middle layer there. And it's like the little people, as IKEA call them, or the many people, as IKEA call them. And then we go straight to the pension fund, because we still need that $100 million check at some point. And I don't see that happening in the crowd for the next little while, at least. But the fact that even as a small player or a small company, we can play with the big boys because there's new tools to do that with.
Yeah. I think it gets you access to those people who have very similar goals. It's not just financial, right? They want to make that impact. So they think a lot more similarly to the way that you do as a company compared to, you know, if you had a traditional private equity group come in there and they're just figuring out, okay, what's our return here? How do we make a bunch of money? Oh, it's green, that's a bonus, I guess, instead of being the focus of what they're doing. So
it's interesting. We deal with, I mean, we've dealt, I think, with 140 different types of investors, and you've got a lot of that cookie cutter tick the boxes and answer all the questions, and then you have the other ones that come in. I really want to do something for the planet. Please go ahead, here are my funds. And it's like it's such a different game, and they are so much happier normally that we're doing what we're doing than the sort of hardcore guy who's just looking at his ROI. But of course, we need both of them. But it's an interesting time right now because it is shifting.
Great. We've got maybe a bit of time for a couple of audience questions. We've got a couple that have come in. So the first one, I think, is quite important. Where do you see the biggest barriers to green investment over the next 5 years? And how do we get past it?
I think first off, we just need more supply, right? Like, I think especially like we were talking about, you got these small groups doing cool stuff like Liquid Wind, and then you have these smaller investors who want to give money, and it's just creating more connections between the two, whether it's with products or platforms or whatever. I also don't think it would hurt to have some kind of policy change where they say, okay, if you invest in a green investment, maybe you don't pay tax. If it's a green bond, you don't pay tax on the interest, or, you know, you get bonus kind of offsets, so it offsets your taxes you pay from your regular income, stuff like that. I think those two things could make quite a difference.
I mean, I don't think I see any barrier really. I see as maybe related to what Bryce is saying. If all the really big guys are going to put all their big money into the projects that are coming with their green, their green focus and their normally sort of relatively low returns, then there's no space for somebody else to be part of that. So that would be a barrier. But I think that there is a part in all the new green stuff is of higher risk in general than the conventional stuff, and therefore you need a little higher return for those investors to go in there. And I think in that context, I actually see there could be quite a good balance that it will actually work even for the small guys to find maybe the smaller, more immature project first, and then as it grows up, they can sell off to the bigger guys that want more security.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in terms of that smaller investor side of things, I mean, you know, Bryce, as you mentioned, there's the tax incentive side of things, but, you know, I think there are also some regulatory hurdles that are perhaps existed from a different era, let's say, of financial regulation, and things are starting to change. The idea of democratization of investment is often talked about. How would those individual or smaller investors, what are the options available to them? I mean, you've spoken a bit about platforms, but, you know, generally speaking, you know, how can they get involved?
Yeah, I mean, I get asked it all the time. I mean, there are some larger publicly traded companies. A lot of them are utilities. So you're investing in them, and then they have a portfolio of wind and solar, but sometimes they also have, you know, natural gas or coal assets as well. There's some kind of pure play ones out there where they're pure renewables. But again, they're kind of slowly getting sopped up by these pension plans. Beyond that, you have the ESG funds, but a lot of those are, in my mind, kind of misinterpreted by a lot of people. You'll see an ESG fund, and it'll talk about E's always first, environment, and there's a wind turbine on the front. But when you peel back the layers, it's not necessarily what you want, right? You think you're investing in wind turbines. If it's an ESG fund in Canada, you're still investing in the index. It's still a lot of oil and gas and financials. It's not really getting you there. I think, you know, there's some of this private stuff like the green bonds. And again, a lot of those aren't very accessible or that attractive, I think, for some of the larger issuances. Like you look at CIBC, they just put out a green bond, $500 million. I don't even know if you can buy it as a retail investor. Chances are it's like $100,000 increments, and it's a 1% interest rate. Yeah. So in my mind, like I said, I think we need more supply. There isn't a ton of products out there. That's really what we're trying to do, is create more products to connect investors with the people who need the capital. But also, like you said, on the regulatory side, like there's so many hurdles, even for us, you know, to become a public company. Like that's a lot of money to maintain and to continue to do, but it is one of the only ways to get access to the kind of wider population of investors. And beyond that is, you know, different platforms like Front Funder where you can invest. But again, I think we need to, in a responsible way, kind of open it up to more people who want to invest in, you know, some great company down the street or in their same hometown or country, or even, you know, in Sweden or whatever. If they like what they're doing, it shouldn't be a barrier that they're not a publicly traded company. And because they only want to invest, you know, $1,000 to $5,000, for example, or a couple $100 or whatever. I think that's what needs to happen, but it's a big ask.
Yeah. Yeah. Change over time. So the other and final question, I think, given our time, what are some new technologies that are emerging in the space that excites you guys?
I think for me, what we're seeing is the how do we call it, adaptation of the conventional internal combustion engine, the ICE, to run on other types of fuels. And as we do that, we can increase the efficiency of that engine. So where it might have had 40% efficiency or 35% efficiency in the past, we can now push it up to 55 and 60, while at the same time reducing emissions, reducing particulate matter, reducing NOx and SOx, and therefore having essentially a better product that is conventional in what we used to, but now it's been spoofed up to run on newer fuels. And the fuel engine combination makes it really interesting. We see the same or similar thing happening in using fuel for fuel cells. So instead of having gaseous fuel, we can have liquid fuel into a fuel cell, and we can now benefit from the high efficiency in the fuel cell. That is also possible to do with our type of fuel. And finally, I think on that same theme, gas turbines that used to be all run on natural gas before, we can now run them on liquid fuel, and therefore store liquid fuel in an easier way. We can make liquid fuel easier, and we can now run them in these alternative places. So there's many places where we can use what we've had and adjust to a better, cleaner, easier operating and carbon neutral fuel. And we see that as a huge opportunity, because now we don't have to shift everything, but we can actually implement very quickly and be carbon neutral without a huge change of infrastructure, which I think is the important piece to get things moving fast.
Yeah, that speed of transition is very important for sure.
Yeah, I would say, well, there's like three main areas, right? You look at emissions, you got kind of the electric grid, you got transportation, and you have kind of buildings. So we got to keep an eye on all three. Obviously, the focus to date has been the electrical grid side. So I'd say the biggest thing there is storage, right? You know, wind and solar, it produces electricity when it's windy or sunny. But to really go 100% renewable, we need to kind of have something to store some of that power. So when the sun's down or it's not windy, we can maintain the load. I would say similar to what Claes was saying about transportation, like we keep quite an eye on different biofuels out there. You see all kinds of interesting technology where you can take, you know, plastic and turn it back into a diesel or any kind of waste stream biofuels. And then I guess lastly, kind of on the building side is just energy efficiency. We think that's quite an interesting space as well. The best thing you can do at the end of the day is just reduce how much you consume, right? So to easily go in somewhere and replace LEDs and make such a huge impact. And I think there's going to be more and more of that, and some unique kind of financial plays you could do there as well.
Yeah, I think that storage piece is critical. I mean, it cuts across all sectors. It's the, on the electricity grid side is maybe more commonly talked about, but I think the concept of liquid fuel, for example, you have a significantly higher density of storage of energy than you do with gaseous fuels, which can often be a big challenge. So I think on both sides of things, in transportation and electricity grid space, that storage is a key enabling technology for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I think that is about the time we have for today. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to Front Funder for hosting this, and thank you to Bryce and Claes. I think I'll just wrap with a couple of key points that I heard from the panelists. I think one actually that was maybe we don't think about as much, but I thought it was interesting for both panelists, the discussion around the digitization impacts. So looking at the benefit of big data, looking at integrated systems that have the ability to help us make better decisions on the technology innovation side and facility development. And then on the finance side, looking at digital platforms that are a much more efficient means of connecting investors with good companies and facilitating transactions. And hopefully these are the kinds of things that can gain more traction and start to remove some of those barriers from a regulatory perspective that are potentially in place from an older way of doing things. And so I think overall it's a pretty exciting future ahead for green investing, the green energy sector. I think the growth has been phenomenal over the last, say, even 5 years really, and that's going to continue going into the future. So I think that we'll wrap it there, but for anyone watching, if you'd like to find out more about RE royalties or liquid wind, go to the Front Funder website and you can find more information on both companies and their current campaigns. Thank you, everybody. And